Okay, well, welcome everybody to CWRAP. That's Conversations with Rotary Action People. And I'd like to welcome those people in the Zoom call and also those on Facebook. And those of you that will watch this later on YouTube, it's enjoyable to see. And we'll have questions and answers, and you can actually put comments on the YouTube site, and Mary can go back in and kind of look at those later. So today we are very, very happy to have Maury and Kathryn Purcell, two Rotarian in Hilton Head at the Sunset Club. And they are going to conduct a little interview, basically, but this is a little bit about mental health. And I'm going to give you a quick bio for Kathryn. She was born in Greenville, South Carolina. She attended Furman. She received BA and MBA degrees there. She spent over 30 years in the farm industry. Her extensive training with healthcare providers raised her awareness of the mental health issues discussed in the book that they're going to talk about. More importantly, her interaction and access to these professionals gave her the direction and much needed resolve to confidently pursue a wrongful death suit against the hospital system, intent on avoiding blame while engaged in a cover-up. Maury is they moved to Hilton Head in December 2021, I think it was. Maury owned and operated a business renovating and selling new bleachers and grandstands. He sold it in 2016. Prior to that, he spent 17 years with W.R. Grace in corporate finance. He's a graduate of Purdue, go Boilers, with an MBA from Ohio State, go Buckeyes. In addition to being a member of Sunset Rotary, he is a member of the board of trustees of Thornwell, a 150-year-old institution caring for abused and abandoned children. So I'd like to turn it over to Maury and Kathryn. And before we just start that, I just remind everybody, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. Okay, Maury, go ahead, Kathryn.
All right, thank you, Lou. My wife, Kathryn, I'm very proud of her, has written a book called There's Something Wrong with Us, A Daughter's Story of Mental Illness, Loss, and Healing. In the back of the book, to quote Leo Tolstoy, all happy families are alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. There's Something Wrong with Us is a story of Kathryn's unhappy family. This memoir is set in Greenville, South Carolina, and shares the mental illness in her family dating back several generations. She also takes an objective look at her narcissistic mother and the toxic impact her behavior had on the family dynamics. There's an event you write about that transcended probably any other moment in your life, and it is found in the prologue. And if you could just spend a second telling us a little bit about the background of that prologue.
Yeah, my sister had come to Greenville, South Carolina to have a hysterectomy. And when I walked into the hospital room, I noticed that she looked awfully gray to me. And my mom was sitting there thinking that she was sleeping comfortably. We got a nurse to come check on her, and they coded her. And crash carts came from every direction, and we lost her. And so I start out the book that way, and then I go back in time to talk about how all of this developed.
Stories written like a novel. You weave in a lot of historical facts about people and places in Greenville and the upstate of South Carolina. There's also a fair amount of quirky Southern humor, because if you grow up in the South, you're going to run into a lot of it. And we have quite a bit. And that's not quite the downer, I don't think. That helps it keep from being the downer it could have been, I think. Don't you?
I think so. And also I talk about overcoming a lot of adversity, living among family members that have a lot of mental illness. But I like to focus on all the people that God placed in my life to help encourage me and give me what my mother couldn't give me.
Why did you write it?
Well, I was still struggling with a lot of emotional and psychological difficulty living with a mom that was so narcissistic. And that's a term I use. She was never clinically diagnosed with that. But she certainly was unable or not willing to be empathetic towards her family or show approval or affection. And I struggled with that, and I'm in my 60s now, and I still struggle with that, but not to the degree that I did until I wrote this book, because it made me realize like I said, how many people God placed in my life to help me along the way. And I'm thankful for that.
Well, when you wrote it, I suggested she write it just if nothing else to kind of show her how far she'd come.
Yeah.
And I think that helped, but it also brought up a lot of pain that hadn't been brought up in a long time. Didn't it?
It really did. And here I was thinking that I was healing. And when I was writing the book, I realized I still had a lot of healing to go. It just brought up a lot of hurt and anger.
Scars are on the inside.
Yeah, scars are on the inside.
You mentioned a quote from a movie that resonated with you that's also you reference in the book. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, it was from Postcards from the Edge. And the main character in that movie said at one point, "There's nothing more horrible you can say to me that I haven't already said to myself." And I really felt that way. It was a lot of negative self-talk because of what I experienced growing up. And I didn't want anybody to feel like that.
The other thing we found really interesting and I think rewarding, well, we hope it is a lot of people, Kathryn, through either book signings or reviews online or just people coming up to her, all walks of life have talked about how the book impacted them.
Yeah, and I was surprised. I thought that this book would resonate more with women, but I've had equal numbers of men and women coming up to tell me that they have experienced similar situations in their families, and that yes, the scars are still there. They may be more the hurt's more tolerable, or they've learned to deal with it, but it's still there.
All walks of life, doctors, very hyper successful business people. It's really been an eye opener. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your parents were like?
Well, they couldn't have been more polar opposite. My dad was a very kind, generous, humble soul. And in contrast, my mom was very self-centered, and I thought very emotionally immature. And I thought that growing up. And the reason I use the term narcissistic, self-centered is because I remember when I was in my 30s or 40s and I was standing in my mom's kitchen one day, and all of a sudden I just said, "Mom, do you realize how your actions and words affect other people?" And she looked at me with the most impassive expression and said, "Kathryn, I don't care how my words and actions affect other people. I only care how things affect me." And I thought, well, I pretty much suspected that. I just was surprised to hear her say it.
The diversity between the two was true about their backgrounds too. They could have been more dissimilar backgrounds.
Yeah. Dad was raised in a little town called Due West, South Carolina, and he went to Erskine College and lettered in 3 sports: football, baseball, basketball. And in fact, his senior year, he was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this just shows you how times have changed. He told him that he needed to go make some money because back then, pro sports didn't pay what they pay now. And so he ended up teaching high school English and coaching football.
After Pearl Harbor was bombed on your dad's birthday. He enlisted.
Birthday, Dad.
Yeah.
And so he enlisted in the Army and ended up in the Air Corps as a bomber pilot. And he flew the largest air armada into the Battle of the Bulge. And for that, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Almost 4,000 planes.
Yeah. And so he came back to South Carolina, and he went to the University of South Carolina and got his pharmacy degree. And yeah. And then he fought and settled in Greenville and fought another battle, which was PTSD.
There's something also that shows you the character of the man. And they were required to fly 30 missions if they survived. His dad flew them, but he had inherited a crew 5 missions in that didn't have any yet. So when he finished his 30, his crew still had 5 missions to go. And he refused to leave until he flew the extra 5 so he could bring them all home with him. And that shows the character of him. He also had a great sense of humor.
He really did. He was a funny guy. And when he loved the University of South Carolina Gamecocks, that he adopted that school and their football team. And when he was working as an intern for his uncle in Greenville at his uncle's pharmacy, he collected his friends and would go down to the University of South Carolina in Columbia to watch the football games. And one day he was flying through the countryside. They were late to the ball game, and he got pulled over by this Southern cop, and he was very, very Southern, drawl and all. And the guy walked up to Dad's side of the car, and he said, Sonny, he said, do you have a pilot's license to operate this vehicle? Because Dad was dropping pretty fast. Anyway, Dad said, as a matter of fact, I do. So he pulled out his wallet and handed him his pilot's license, and no one knew how this cop was going to take that. But he finally just laughed and said, son, just slow it down, and walked off.
Your mom, by contrast, had a totally different background.
Yeah, she was from a little town in North Carolina, a little rural town called Longdale. And her parents were farmers. They were fairly poor. My grandfather was also a Southern minister, a Baptist minister. And she didn't play with other kids. She played with cats and dressed them up. She just, I guess, didn't really want to cultivate friendships with other kids. But she was doted on by the relatives and the parishioners in that area. And I somehow think maybe that had something to do with how she ended up becoming so self-centered, but I'm not sure.
Her dad, of course, was pretty worldly, having been overseas and being in sports and traveling. Her mom, the farthest she'd ever gone was 75 miles away to college.
To go to Furman,
yeah. Their different dispositions and backgrounds had a huge impact on how they lived their lives, and how they handled things.
Yeah.
How would you describe your mom's treatment of you three kids?
Well, she was very controlling, and she would limit who we could see. I didn't know many of my cousins or relatives because she really wanted us to be isolated from other people, I guess, so she could control the content or interactions we had with others. I felt like she could be very vindictive. I felt like she was a bully, and she was highly critical of us without giving any approval. And so that had a tendency to weigh heavily on our self-esteem and our ability to socialize with others.
She called you all names.
She called us names and made faces at us, especially if we got upset with her discipline or punishment or whatever she was enforcing.
She inferred that you were stupid or slow.
She did, and compared me to Tommy Smothers because she didn't think he was very bright.
Made faces at you and mocked you. It's no wonder that as an adult you struggle with criticism and dealing in the real world with folks.
Yeah, with constructive criticism. I just felt like I was under assault.
Interestingly, she never did these things in front of your dad.
No, she didn't. Dad worked a lot. I mean, this is a typical 50s, 60s family. Dad was the breadwinner. She was the parent that raised the kids. And I never noticed when he was around on the weekends, I never noticed her doing any of this in front of him, which led me to believe it was calculated, and she knew right from wrong.
This, I think, was amazing to me. She never acknowledged birthdays.
No, she didn't.
I mean, even when you were little kids, no birthday acknowledgement.
No.
Yeah. Do you ever remember her playing with you or
I don't.
teaching you or going over homework with you?
I don't. And I remember that she would comment to me as an adult, your father used to say I needed to teach you more things. And I thought, I don't remember you teaching me anything.
So how did you three deal with your mom? Your older sister, Elise, your brother, Mike, you're the youngest. How did you guys deal with her?
Well, we each dealt with her in a different way. My sister was very compliant, and she was a little mini me. So she got along really well with Mom, which didn't help Elise out a lot because Elise had a lot of mental illness as well. And we'll talk about that. My brother he retreated. He just didn't want to have anything to do with her. He didn't have hardly any interaction with her. And so he withdrew, is what I'm trying to say. And I, on the other hand, I challenged her. And I would let her know that I thought she was being awfully hard on us, or she was mean, or the whatever punishment didn't quite fit the crime. And I paid for that honesty.
Yeah, you did. There was a history of mental illness in her family.
Yeah,
correct?
there was. And on her father's side, Seth, he was the oldest of 6 kids. And 2 of his sisters lived in a drafty farmhouse, and they wore layers of tattered clothes, and all they would eat were boiled eggs and loaf bread. And they never left the house, I mean, for years. And I remember meeting them for the first time when I was 5, and they scared me. I just thought that was so odd. And then his youngest sibling, Johnny, was committed to a mental institution for over 30 years. And I never met the guy. But those, 3 out of 6 kids, that's 50% were unbalanced or unstable.
Let's talk about your sister, Elise, from her struggles with mental illness.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on family dynamics too.
It really did. I mean, she started exhibiting bizarre, aggressive behavior at 3. She bit our boxer, and the dog went after her. Dad hadn't grabbed her and moved her out of the way. The dog would have mauled her. And then as she got older, she just fly in these fits of rage and take it out on Mike and I. And she would scratch us or pick up the closest object and throw it at us. And Mom's reaction to all that was just leave Elise alone. She's just, she just needs her space. And then as she grew more or matured more, she when we horses, she would just drop the reins when she'd get angry with the horse and start clawing it and biting the horse on the neck. And then again, as she continued to get older, she got more involved in promiscuous sex and drugs and alcohol and driving her car too fast. And then later she ended up going to medical school and overdosed.
Besides her problem, she was very bright.
She was
got into medical school.
Extremely bright, very beautiful, and an overachiever.
But she overdosed and had to drop out.
Had to drop out, yeah.
And interestingly, who went to pick her up? Her mom sent her and a friend, Kathryn's friend, to go pick her up. She didn't even want to be bothered to go down to Charleston to figure out what's going on. So a lot of pressure on her. But later on, she finally got diagnosed, right?
She did. She was misdiagnosed when she came home from medical school. She was misdiagnosed with schizophrenia. And then in her 30s, she continued to pursue what was wrong with her and got a proper diagnosis, or at least we thought so, with bipolar, and got medicated. And she told me, she said, when she was medicated for that, this is the best I've ever felt in my life.
How old was she then?
She was in her mid-30s. So she spent a long time dealing with those demons.
We've mentioned it before, but how did humor play a role in your life? It's one of your sanity savers.
I think it was. I really do, because I love to laugh, and I got that from my dad. And so I just I go through life looking for funny things, or looking at life to see what how it could be humorous.
You loved hanging out in the store with your dad at his drugstore.
I did. And it accomplished 2 things. Number 1, to get away from Mom, but number 2, to hang out with him, because he was just a neat guy. And the store offered a lot of funny stories.
Yeah, a lot of quirky, a lot of characters came through there.
Like to hang out there.
Like to hang out there. There's a chapter in the book called "The Man Walks Into a Drugstore," and it's got some pretty funny stories in it. Your mom, on the other hand, had zero sense of humor, but she had some harebrained ideas that were a source of comedy, if nothing else.
Yeah, really. When I was 6, she decided that she got us involved with horseback riding, and she got me a donkey and my sister a horse. And then she decided that my donkey, Speedy Kate, I named it after my mom, Kate.
Brave.
part stupid. And so she decided that Speedy Kate needed to go live up on Grandma and Grandpa's farm, an hour and a half away. So she got this idea that to save money, we should take the back seat out of a 57 four-door sedan and put Speedy in the back seat or in the back of the car, and Dad could drive her up to Lawndale with my sister in the co-pilot seat, feeding Speedy apples the whole way. Well, she ate, pooped, and braved the whole way. And when we got to our destination, I don't know who got out of the car fastest, Speedy, Mom, Dad, or Elise. But anyway, we left the car there, and we never tried to drive it home or salvage it.
I found it humorous, but I don't know that you did so much. Kathryn wrote also a book or a chapter in her book called Downhill Dating, which was about your dating experiences. Anything you want to share about that?
Well, it was humorous, but it was also pitiful because I seemed to I was attracting self-centered people, self-centered men. And so when you came along and you weren't self-centered, I thought, well, why are you interested in me? And then that got me thinking, what's wrong with you if you're interested in me?
The answer was nothing. I came from a boringly normal Midwest family. How would you describe our early relationship?
I think we became buddies immediately, and I knew that I had an ally, real lot like my dad.
We talked about getting married, and you didn't want to initially, but you also laid down some markers on that too.
Yeah, I did. I thought, I just thought I had too much emotional baggage. And I had already decided at a young age that I did not want to have kids. I did not want to risk doing to a child what was done to me. And I didn't think you should be deprived of that opportunity.
So we wrestled with that issue for a while and decided, I said, I'd rather have her. If that's the way it was going to be, we would deal with it. And almost 34 years later, we're still cooking. So I guess it worked out okay.
So far.
But we found out that this is not uncommon for women that had abusive mothers, severely abusive mothers, that not having children was not that uncommon. We had a few bumpy ways along the way, a few little bumpy bumps here and there. But.
Well, it was mainly the main thing that we thought about was my mother and how she treated me. And you got a first bird's eye view of that early on when we were planning for the wedding. We were going to have a small wedding. Maury and I were planning to pay for it because we were older when we got married, not right out of school. And so I took the invitation list over to show my mother. It was just going to be like 75 people in a chapel. And when I took it over to show her, she said, "Oh, I can't possibly attend this wedding if you're not going to invite your all of your father's past and present customers." And I said, "Well, Mom, I can't do that. I mean, these people don't even know me, and they're just going to think I'm trying to get a gift." And she said, "Well, then I can go to your wedding." And so I went straight to my dad's drugstore to tell him what happened. And he said, "Babe, I'm walking you down the aisle, and she's going to be there." So I knew he said it with such conviction, I knew I could trust him, and she was, but boy, we paid a price for that.
Let's move on and talk about the years 2000, 2007,
Okay.
the final years you write about. 2000, your sister died, as we mentioned, unexpectedly.
Yeah. And then, and that, boy, that really sent us, if we were not already in a tailspin, that the family dynamics were circling the drain. Mom didn't want to share her grief with anyone. And that really hurt my dad because he wanted to share his grief with her. And I think that upset him even more than losing Elise. And I, on the other hand, I just channeled my energy into trying to find out what happened to Elise. And
With overwhelming support from your doctors and nurses you called on.
Yeah.
5 years later.
Lost my dad unexpectedly. And then 15 short months later, I lost Mom. And I really did feel that God was punishing me, or I wasn't living my life correctly, or I don't know. I was so confused and hurt.
It was a tough time. you in the final chapter, she wrote the book and finished it in 19, before we moved 20, before we moved down here. You wrestled a lot with forgiveness of your mom and everything else and how that all worked out.
I did. In fact, I didn't feel like I had healed. I felt like I just revved up all those emotions. So I put the book aside. We moved to Hilton Head, where everything is so peaceful here. And as I began to, as time went on, after a few months, I realized that I felt nothing but compassion towards my mother. And so I rewrote that final chapter, really feeling sorry for her that she had lived such an unfulfilled life.
You end the chapter though on a positive note, a strong positive note.
I realized how many angels God had placed in my path. I mean, starting early on with our housekeeper, Susie, my dad, who I said my first words to, my 5th grade teacher, Miss Allen, who brought me to Christ, my grandparents, your mom. There are just so many people that were there, that Scruggy, my nanny, so many people that really cared about me.
So I guess the message is that you have said that if you're hurting like this, the best thing you can do is try to reach out to those folks that are reaching out to you and grab them, because
absolutely,
that's what got you through.
It was.
Much of the literature about emotional abuse states that 1 out of every 7 kids before the age of 18 will experience some form of emotional abuse from either a parent or a guardian. And that's why Kathryn and I are very avid supporters of Thornwell. It's been around for 150 years. We thank you for your time. I think we're right there. And if you have any questions or anything, we'd be happy to answer.
Well, we do have a couple, Maury and Kathryn. First, I want to mention to everybody that the book's name is There's Something Wrong with Us by Kathryn Purcell. And that's something you might be interested. There you go. That out in front of everybody. A couple of questions came up. At some point, do you think your mother ever realized that she had mental issues?
You know, I'm glad that question was asked, because 3 months before she died, I called her one day and I said that I wanted to take her to lunch. And she said, you know, I woke up this morning thinking of everything wrong I've ever done in my life. Now, my mother had never admitted wrong in her life, not in front of any of us family members. And I do think that she was starting to realize that there was something wrong with her.
And just related to that, you mentioned your sister's situation. Your brother, is he married today? Does he have children? Is he mentally stable?
Michael is married and he has a son who has a terrific job. He lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I would say that Michael compartmentalized what happened to us as kids, and he got away from Greenville as soon as he could. He went to through ROTC at Furman, and then flew out of this country as soon as he could, and lived in Germany for years. And I just think he wanted to put Greenville and that whole experience behind him.
And still that way. Have contact, but not a lot.
Yeah. He doesn't want to talk about the past.
Well, just another comment. May is Mental Health Month, so it's good that we're doing this. And in conjunction with that, a question: how are you today, from a mental standpoint? I
think I'm doing so much better. I was diagnosed also with anxiety and depression, and I sought help early. I mean, as soon as I realized when Elise died that I was not handling that situation real well, especially since I became more of a punching bag to my mother. And so I got on an antidepressant. I tried to talk to 2 ministers. I didn't get very far with those 2 individuals, but I did see a minister who had a counselor who had his PhD in psychology. But unfortunately, he kept saying, you just need to tell your mother how she makes you feel. And I kept saying, she doesn't care how I feel. I repeated what she told me in the kitchen. She does not care how her actions and words affect other people. So I think that it didn't work out for me with that counselor, but I understand it takes a while. If you continue to look for people that can help you, you can find them, but don't give up.
There's a couple of good comments in the chat. The author, Pat Conroy, came from a
Oh.
dysfunctional family.
Sure did.
In his book, The Death of Santini, he said every family has at least one member that's a little unusual, if not way out there. And in conjunction with that, one of the favorite sayings of one of our attendees is, everyone in the world is messed up except me and you. And I'm not so sure about you. In other words, each of us has our particular quirks, and I'm sure that is true if we all kind of take a hard look at ourselves. That was very interesting. I do encourage folks to take a look at the book, see what is in there and how it can help you. We all have our own struggles, particularly over the last 2.5 years. I think those struggles may have come forward just a little bit more than they would sort of in normal times.
You're right, Lou.
Are there any medications that you were involved with in terms of helping, or any suggestions to people?
Yeah. I think there's so many medications out there now to treat mental illness. I just encourage people to, you may click with one counselor or doctor or whatever, or you may not click with somebody. The point is, hang in there. Keep trying to find somebody that you do feel like you can talk to and that can give you an appropriate diagnosis.
We found the people at NAMI to be very good. Kathryn's worked with the NAMI folks a little bit too, and the regional director of NAMI addressed our Rotary about 3 weeks ago. They've got their hands full, and it's an interesting organization because it doesn't provide care, but it does referrals more than anything, or helps people. It's a great organization.
Well said. Well, that is all of the questions, and I think we've just about wrapped it up. I want to thank both Kathryn and Maury for coming on and
Thanks, Lou and Mary.
basically giving us pretty good information. I think that the more we talk about the things that kind of trouble us, the better off we're going to be. It's
I
just
agree.
finding the person to talk to.